This is the best and strongest Warlock build in Destiny 2 right now. So now that we have all our 3.0 subclasses out, and since we're going to be going into Lightfall, I definitely wanted to update all the best subclasses for each of the characters, and this is definitely the one for the Warlock. This build plays into a huge support base role alongside letting you be able to do a bunch of at clear and single target damage at the same time. This is the build that I personally used to solo flawless the brand new dungeon, and the build that I used in a ton of day one and normal raids. This build also doesn't require any seasonal mods, so you can use this throughout the entirety of the game, and I think you all are going to enjoy it. But before we jump into that, I'm excited to announce my brand new partnership with Apex Gaming PCs. Because of you all and your continued support over the years, you have literally made a dream of mine become a reality, and I seriously cannot thank you all enough. With the partnership, I have made my own custom line of PCs that are price optimized to run Destiny 2 alongside a bunch of other titles at fantastic performance rates. Really quick, if we just take a look at our PC line, playing on the rest short name, we have the Snoozer, Sleeper, and Dreamer option, and I mean, come on, just look at how nice this PC looks. Also, my entire PC line is customizable, so if you want to switch things up to your liking, you can do that as well. Alongside my own PC line, I also have my own discount code, which is code REST. You can use this at checkout to save up to $250 on your next purchase. On top of that, Apex also does offer financing options if you are into that. So if you are in the market for a PC, be sure to check out the links below. Remember to use code REST at checkout. It seriously helps the channel out a ton, and I truly appreciate it. But all right, jump right into it. We're going to be running our solar subclass, specifically with Wall of Radiance. Wall of Radiance is by far the best super in the game. It has been the best forever at this point. They tried to nerf it without getting the overshield, but with the resilience buffs, it's arguably even better than what it once was. This is just going to give you a bunch of healing and some extra damage. It is very good for obviously a boss DPS situation, and on top of that, it's also very good for just survivability. If you're in a tight situation, you're about to die, you can throw this down and you're pretty much always going to live, and then you can throw all that damage back to the enemies trying to kill you. So Wall of Radiance definitely is the go-to take for here, and it's not even a question. So let's start talking about our aspects. For aspects, I personally like to run Icarus Dash. This is going to let you get a dodge while you are airborne, and on top of that, you will actually get Cure applied to you if you get a lot of kills while you're in the air. Cure is just a solid burst of healing. That is all it is. It's not like Restoration. You just get a little bit of health back. Now, if you want to run something like Heat Rises instead of Icarus Dash, you can, because this will actually give you more melee energy while you're in the air when you're getting kills. Now, I personally don't like to run Heat Rises just because I prefer Icarus Dash a lot more, because that dodge is not only insanely strong for just mobility, saving yourself if you're falling off the map, it's also not even bad for the applications of, you know, dodging enemies' bullets, or just getting in the corner to help with your survivability. But again, Heat Rises does help you with things like jumping puzzles, because you can consume that grenade, float in the air, and you will also get a bunch of melee energy back when you get those kills in the air. So this was kind of up to you. They get the same fragment slots. I just prefer Icarus Dash. Now, the mod you definitely need to take is Touch of Flame. Touch of Flame is an aspect that's actually going to buff your grenades in a lot of different ways. We are specifically going to be running fusion grenades, so the only one we care about is where it's going to make it explode twice. Fusion grenades are very strong. They have a very low cooldown. It's sitting at 1 minute and 13 seconds, which we were going to be buffing anyway. And these can actually do a ton of damage. Alone, they're already very good grenades, but pairing this with Touch of Flame, letting them explode twice is going to do an absurd amount of damage, and it's going to ignite enemies, which makes it do even more damage. Now, before I get into the rest of the subclass, since we're on the topic of fusion grenades, I want to talk about the exotic I'm running, and that is Starfire Protocol. So this has the exotic trait Fusion Harness. Fusion grenades have an additional charge and recharge from empowered weapon damage. Fusion grenade kills grant rift energy. So this exotic is pretty self-explanatory in the sense that this will give you an extra fusion grenade charge. So you're gonna have 2 grenades instead of 1, which is always insanely strong. But on top of that, if you do get empowered weapon damage, and specifically for this build, we're gonna be running the empowering rift, because when we're standing in this rift doing damage, it will regenerate our grenade. And then on top of that, if you do get a grenade kill, you will automatically reproc your rift energy. So you have a constant loop of putting your rift down, getting a bunch of grenades, you get your grenade, you throw a grenade, get a kill, you get your rift back, and you pretty much get infinite rifts and infinite grenades. Now, if you don't want to take a powering rift, healing rift also is a great option. The grenade final blows will still grant you your healing rift, so you can, you know, have a little bit more survivability, but doing damage in the healing rift will not supply you with fusion grenades. That is the trade-off, but if you need more survivability, healing rift can work. But I personally like taking the empowering rift and the fusion grenades because they just pair extremely well with your exotic, and getting that extra grenade is just a nice cherry on top. And then finally, for melee, I personally like to run Incendiary Snap. If you want a more long range option, you can go with Celestial Fire. Incinerator Snap is just very good in my opinion, because the way you can use this is sort of like a shotgun. If you run up to an enemy, snap the ground, not the actual target, all of the sparks that come out in Incinerator Snap will hit an enemy and ignite, and if they all hit, it is enough to ignite the enemy, which will do a huge chunk of damage and honestly be able to act clear a lot as well. I absolutely love the interaction with Incinerator Snap, and on top of that, even if you don't want to do that, you could spread Scorch to a lot of enemies instead of focusing on one target. It is just a more shorter range melee. But like I said, if you want to run Celestial Fire, that is an option, but I would highly recommend running Incinerator Snap and trying to get that technique down, because you can pretty much just instantly ignite any enemy that is chasing you. Now for fragments, I personally love to play into the Scorch / Fusion Grenade aspect of this build, less than the Radiant / Restoration part of the build. If you want to go Radiant / Restoration, I would highly recommend taking another build, but this build is all about killing everything and burning everything to a crisp before it can kill you. So for that, I like to take Ember of Charge. So your Solar Ignition spreads Scorch to affected targets. You're going to be making ignitions everywhere with your melee and your grenades, so this is going to apply Scorch, which will help out later in the build and allow us to do some extra damage. I also like to run Ember of Eruption, so your Solar Ignitions have increased area of effect. This means that at clear the build is going to be even better, since the ignitions already do a ton of single target damage. They are now going to have even bigger explosions for your melee and grenades, which will then eventually kill everything else, but if it doesn't, it will obviously also scorch them with Ember of Charge. Now, I'll also run Ember of Ashes so I can apply more scorch stacks to targets. This is going to make it even easier for your grenades and your melee to actually ignite enemies, because the more scorch stacks you have, the better the chances they have to ignite. And then finally, I have Ember of Searing. So defeating scorch targets grants melee energy. This you can kind of trade out for whatever you want to. I personally really enjoyed this aspect of the build, because since I'm going to be scorching enemies everywhere with things like my grenades, if the ignitions don't kill them, I'll apply more Scorch stacks. The melee itself applies Scorch alongside the grenade. Even the Well of Radiance will apply Scorch if you drop it nearby enemies. This means every single time you get kills on all these enemies, you'll be granted some melee energy, which I honestly do play heavily into this build. I don't just worry about grenades. I honestly do use my melee a ton with this, because I really do love the interaction of just snapping the ground and blowing everything up around you. Now, we're not done there yet with Scorch. We're also going to be running a primary weapon with Incandescent. Incandescent is one of the strongest perks in the game. Whenever you kill an enemy, it will actually spread Scorch around the target you kill. They will essentially kind of blow up like Firefly, but instead you're applying Scorch to enemies. So what this means is that now when you get gun kills, you're also going to be applying Ember of Searing, which kind of makes your gun have Pugilist in a way, and that means you will also get even more melee energy back. On top of that, since you are scorching everything with your gun, you can then use an Incinerator Snap to instantly ignite every single enemy, because you're also running Ember of Ashes. You're going to have enough Scorch stacks to pretty much always proc ignites anytime you want to if you're comboing things together, and this just makes it extremely easy. But now, since the Callus mini tool is a short range option, I would highly recommend you all craft the brand new, well, not brand new, but the Deepstone Crypt Trusty. This can actually roll with Incandescent on it now, which means you can have a long range option for this as well. Plus the origin trade's also relatively nice. Between this and the Callus mini tool, this is by far going to be my go-to options to run in the primary slot to proc Incandescent to help out with the Scorch aspect of the build. But I honestly really like Callus mini tool on its own because of Unrelenting, which we'll get back into in a little bit when I dive deep more into the survivability of the build. Now, for other weapons, I like to run the Cataclysmic. This is just one of the strongest power weapons of the game right now. Any solar heavy weapon that is in the meta, I would definitely recommend running that, because we're going to be playing heavily into buffing our solar damage. And then Wither Horde is going to be a perfect pairing. If you want to run Anarchy, could, but Wither Horde is amazing for this, because what this does is actually going to apply a tick damage to whatever enemy you're shooting at, which in return, if you're standing in a Powering Rift or a Well of Radiance, it will actually feed you grenade energy back because of Starfire Protocol. So what you can do is throw Wither Horde at an enemy while you're in a rift. You can swap something like a rocket or just any other thing, and you can constantly throw grenades while you're also doing damage with something else. Wither Horde on its own is also a very good at clear option. It is also just very good for adding single target damage. And with this season specifically, you also have the aspect of weaken clear, which you can play into as well, which I will get into later once we start talking about mods. But now, stat distribution. I would highly recommend 100 resilience and 100 discipline, since this is going to be the main aspect of the build. You want to spam as many fusion grenades as possible for extra damage for add clear, and 100 resilience is also going to give you that 40% damage reduction to help out with survivability. If you can't get 100, another stat, recovery or strength is going to be the way to go. As you see, I do opt in with strength, because again, I'm not even exaggerating. If you can get the Incinerator Snap technique down, it is very strong, and it's definitely not something you should just look over. But getting back to resilience, let's actually talk about survivability. So since we're not taking restoration, we need to find other ways to be able to live. And that is going to be from things like Harmonic Siphon right here. So whenever I rapidly defeat targets with a gun that matches my subclass type, I'll make an orb of power. On top of that, I will also be running recuperation. So whenever I pick up those orbs of power, I will be replenished some health. Now, when I was talking about Unrelenting, since getting multi-kills is going to make a orb that will replenish some of my health, Unrelenting will also proc when getting these multi-kills and essentially give you some health regeneration as well. Those two alone paired with 100 resilience is really good for survivability, but even if you can't make that work, I'm also going to be running things like Well of Life. So whenever I pick up a solar elemental well and matches my subclass type, I'll regenerate health for a short period of time. This is another one of those cherry on top type of deals where that's just going to add to everything else that I just went over, and it makes you pretty much unkillable if you are playing relatively safe and killing everything as fast as possible, which is what this build is meant to do. Now, I am also going to be running an elemental ordnance, so whenever I defeat a combatant with a grenade, it will spawn an element that matches my subclass type. That is going to be the way I proc Well of Life, because I will make a solar elemental well with my elemental ordnance, then in return it will proc Well of Life. I'm also going to be running Phantomite, so whenever I pick up that solar elemental well, it will give me a damage increase. Since you're going to be able to make solar elemental wells everywhere, since you're going to be spamming grenades 24/7, this is always going to give you a damage increase for both of your primary and heavy weapons, which is obviously a very, very good benefit. Now, I do also like to throw on a bountiful wells just so I can make additional orbs. This is essentially going to make your elemental well mods that can make wells stack, but if you only run one of these and this mod, you will get 2 wells. So now I will be making 2 solar elemental wells with elemental ordnance, which does help out with getting your melee energy back. And with everything going on with your melee, especially with things like Ember of Searing, not only do you have infinite uptime on your grenades and rift, but also your melee as well. And then finally, I like to run seeking wells, so my elemental wells I create will actually track to me. So this means it just makes the flow of the build easier. I get a grenade kill far away, it will track to me. I will get that damage bonus, I will get the health generation, and I will get that ability energy back as well. Now, as you saw, I'm currently running seasonal mods, but you don't have to run these. I do personally like to run Monochromatic Maestro with this build, because this means when I do ability damage, I get gun damage. When I do gun damage, I get ability damage. This is only a 10% damage increase, but this does stack with everything we've already went over. So that means when I have Phantomite proc, I will now also get a bonus damage to Monochromatic Maestro, which means my heavy weapons doing even more damage, especially when you proc things like Bait and Switch. All that stacks together and you can just do chunks of damage. Now, other seasonal mods, as I talked about, Weaken Clear is a great option to pair with this if you're trying to do the Wither Horde Fusion Grenade spam route, since this means you're going to be able to weaken a boss with this or a champion, which is very, very nice. Then if you're going in solo, pretty much always take solo operative, because it's just a permanent 15% damage boost 24/7, and you don't even have to worry about doing anything. You just get a damage bonus. Now, if you don't want to run seasonal mods, I would highly recommend taking Outreach. So this means you're going to get reduced melee cooldown when you use your class ability. If you don't care about your melee, you can definitely take things like Bomber to get more grenade energy when you use your rift cooldown, but I like taking this since you're having infinite rifts and grenades in the first place. That is also going to play into the fact that when you pop your rift, you're getting even more melee energy now, alongside things like your wells and Ember of Searing. So as you see, like I was talking about earlier, you have pretty much 100% uptime on your Simulator Sap, which is a very potent part of the build. I cannot stress that enough. And then for my other seasonal mods, I do just have a energy diffusion substrate, but obviously you can take that out as well. And then right now, currently in the season, Overload SMG is a thing, which is very, very nice, since Callous Mini Tool is pretty much your go-to option. Obviously, these are going to swap out from season to season, and you need to run whatever champion mods are necessary for in-game content. But as of now, this is a very strong option, since Callous Mini Tool is the best primary you can pair with this. But that is pretty much the build. Just as a rundown really quick, again, you throw a Well of Radiance or a Rift down, you can throw with a Horde or just shoot a normal enemy. You're going to get infinite solar grenades. The fusion grenades are also just very good for general play as well, because they are very good for ad clear. You're going to have Scorch applying everywhere with all your fragments, which in return is going to give you melee energy. You can use the Incinerator Snap technique, so you can actually, make your melee relatively strong as well. You're going to be getting bonuses to weapon damage from everywhere. You're going to get a bunch of health generation. You become pretty much unkillable, and you can just blow everything up in the entire game. This is one of my favorite builds, and this is by far the strongest build on the Warlock right now in the game. This is probably what most people are going to be running at the beginning of Lightfall or even in the day 1 raid, unless Bungie does come out and actually nerf some parts of this, but I don't really see that happening because it's been this strong for a very long time. But anyway, that is going to do it for me. If you guys would like to try this build out, I will have a dim link to it in the description below. But if you guys did enjoy and learn anything new, consider subscribing, drop a like, and turn notifications on. Also, if you'd like to join my Discord or follow me on any of my socials, all that will be linked in the description as well. But just know watching this video is way more than enough, and that every single bit of support from you all is truly appreciated. Thank you all so much for watching this one, and have a great day. Peace.